The 10 best movies of all time. Silent classics, noir, space operas, and everything in between. Somehow we managed to rank the best movies of all time. All lists are made to start arguments, but a list of the greatest movies of all time is particularly loaded. No other art form has evolved so drastically over the last century and a half. Sure, kids these days may prefer Harry Styles to the Beatles, but a good song is always going to be a good song. A great melody never ages, and a hot beat stays hot forever. But is it possible for modern audiences to see Citizen Kane the same way audiences in the 1940s did? Can Hitchcock still be considered the master of suspense after decades of directors stealing his tricks? It's barely been 14 years since The Dark Knight, and there's a whole generation that likely considers Christopher Nolan's take on Batman old hat. Ranking the best films ever made clearly isn't easy, but that wasn't going to stop us from trying. On this ever-evolving list, you'll find box office blockbusters to cult classics, comedies, both romantic and ridiculous, horror flicks to crime capers. It spans over 100 years in multiple countries. And even with all that ground covered, it's sure not to please every reader. You might get angry, but hey, that's what lists are for, right? Just don't yell too loudly, please. 1. 2001: A Space Odyssey. The greatest film ever made began with the meeting of two brilliant minds, Stanley Kubrick and sci-fi seer Arthur C. Clarke. I understand he's a nut who lives in a tree in India somewhere, noted Kubrick when Clarke's name came up, along with those of Isaac Asimov, Robert A. Heinlein, and Ray Bradbury, as a possible writer for his planned sci-fi epic. Clarke was actually living in Ceylon, but the pair met, hit it off, and forged a story of technological progress and disaster that's steeped in humanity, in all its brilliance, weakness, courage, and mad ambition. An audience of stoners, wowed by its eye-candy Stargate sequence and pioneering visuals, adopted it as a pet movie. Were it not for them, 2001 might have faded into obscurity, but it's hard to imagine it would have stayed there. Kubrick's frighteningly clinical vision of the future, AI and all, still feels prophetic, more than 50 years on. 2. The Godfather. From the wise guys of Goodfellas to the Sopranos, all crime dynasties that came after the Godfather are descendants of the Corleones. Francis Ford Coppola's magnum opus is the ultimate patriarch of the mafia genre. A monumental opening line sets the operatic Mario Puzo adaptation in motion, before Coppola's epic morphs into a chilling dismantling of the American dream. The corruption-soaked story follows a powerful immigrant family grappling with the paradoxical values of rain and religion. Those moral contradictions are crystallized in a legendary baptism sequence, superbly edited in parallel to the murdering of 4 rivaling dons. With countless iconic details, a horse's severed head, Marlon Brando's wheezy voice, Nito Rota's catchy waltz, The Godfather's authority lives on. 3. Citizen Kane. Back in the headlines thanks to David Fincher's brilliantly acerbic making of drama Mank, Citizen Kane always finds a way to renew itself for a new generation of film lovers. For newbies, the journey of its bulldozer of a protagonist, played with inexhaustible force by actor-director wunderkind Orson Welles, from unloved child to thrusting entrepreneur to press baron to populist, feels entirely au courant. You can bathe in the film's groundbreaking techniques, like Greg Toland's deep focus photography, or the limitless self-confidence of its staging and its investigation of American capitalism. But it's also just a damn good story that you definitely don't need to be a hardened cineast to enjoy. 4. Star Wars. Popcorn Pictures hit hyperdrive after George Lucas unveiled his intergalactic western, an intoxicating gee-whiz space opera with dollops of Joseph Campbell, style mythologizing that obliterated the moral complexities of 1970s Hollywood. This postmodern movie brat pastiche references a virtual syllabus of genre classics, from Metropolis and Triumph of the Will to Kurosawa's samurai actioners, Flash Gordon serials, and WWII thrillers like The Dam Busters. Luke Skywalker's quest to rescue a princess instantly elevated B-movie bliss to billion-dollar franchise sagas. 5. Seven Samurai. It's the easiest 207 minutes of cinema you'll ever sit through. On the simplest of frameworks, a poor farming community pools its resources to hire samurai to protect them from the brutal bandits who steal its harvest. Akira Kurosawa mounts a finely drawn epic, by turns absorbing, funny, and exciting. Of course, the action sequences stir the blood. The final showdown in the rain is unforgettable, but this is really a study in human strengths and foibles. Toshiro Mifune is superb as the half-crazed, self-styled samurai, but it's Takashi Shimura's Yoda-like leader who gives the film its emotional center. Since replayed in the Wild West, in space, and even with animated insects, the original still reigns supreme. 6. There Will Be Blood. On the road to becoming the most significant filmmaker of the last 20 years, Paul Thomas Anderson transformed from a Scorsese chronicler of debauched life into a hard-nosed investigator of the American confidence man. The pivotal point was There Will Be Blood, an epic about a certain kind of hustler, the oil baron and prospector. Daniel Plainview is, in the final analysis, an ultra-scary Daniel Day-Lewis who will drink your milkshake. Scored by Radiohead's Johnny Greenwood, Anderson's mournful epic is the true heir to Chinatown's bone-deep cynicism. As Phantom Thread makes clear, Anderson hasn't lost his sense of humor, not by a long shot. But there once was a moment when he needed to get serious, and this is it. 7. Jaws. Steven Spielberg's immortal blockbuster doesn't need political prescience to stay relevant. It's a movie about a big-ass shark eating people. Thanks in large part to the film itself. That's one irrational fear the public is never letting go of. Over the last 2 years, though, whenever some elected official has argued against mask mandates and said it's time to reopen schools, it's been hard not to think about Mayor Vaughn in his goofy anchor print suit telling the citizens of Amity Island that it's safe to go back in the water. And that element, along with the masterful pacing, that get you every time jump scares and that banger of a third act, is what really makes Jaws forever frightening. Sharks are scary, but greed and incompetence are far more likely to get you. 8. Goodfellas. As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. Ray Liotta's opening line is the crime movie equivalent of Once Upon a Time. And what follows is Martin Scorsese's version of a fairy tale. The story of a starry-eyed Brooklyn kid who realizes his boyhood dream and still comes out a schnook in the end. Based on the true life of mobster Henry Hill, Goodfellas was born in the shadow of The Godfather. But as the years go on, the question of which is more influential becomes mostly a matter of generation. Certainly, the former is more easily rewatchable, owing to its breakneck pacing. Its 2.5 hours just whiz by. And for a movie about violent career criminals, it's also strangely relatable. Where Coppola went inside the walls of organized crime's 1%, Scorsese's gangsters are more blue-collar. And as it turns out, working for the mafia isn't much different than any other job. You spend 30 years busting your hump to climb the ladder, only to end up face down on a bloody carpet in some tacky house in the burbs. 9. The Dark Knight. There's a new Batman in Gotham, in the shadowy form of Matt Reeves as the Batman, and this is the bar it has to clear. A middle entry in Christopher Nolan's Bat trilogy is an almost flawless case study of how to do a sophisticated superhero epic for modern audiences. And the almost is only because the final act refreshingly tries to cram in almost too many ideas. Much moral arithmetic. Heath Ledger's Joker, meanwhile, redefines big screen villainy. It's not enough to be sinister. You need a party trick now too. 10. Do the Right Thing. Spike Lee's bitterly funny, ultimately tragic fresco of a Brooklyn neighborhood during one sweltering summer day was hugely controversial at the time. Critics dinged Lee for his depiction of an uprising in the wake of a police killing. The movie has lost none of its relevance or power. If anything, it's gained some. But the filmmaking is what makes this a classic, particularly the energy, wit, and style with which Lee presents this microcosm and the social forces at play inside it. We are sure you have your own opinions about our list. Let us know what you think by commenting below.